Welcome to the Guide to Wellness podcast. I'm Susanna, licensed acupuncturist. We're here to chat about health and well-being. Just a reminder, everything in this podcast is information only, not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. It's useful information to maintain a healthy life balance.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Guide to Wellness podcast. As you may have noticed, Susanna is not with us today. But we're going to be doing another seasonal update talking about how we move through the different seasons. And we're maybe a little late to this one as it is beginning of August. But we're talking about summer. Mm-hmm. I hope you've adapted with the seasons in whatever ways that you have available and aren't leading your ox by the same nose you were 4 months ago, if that metaphor makes any sense. And if it makes no sense at all, you should listen to our spring podcast.
And I question, is it the same ox, or are you leading it by a different body part, or what?
Well,
how does that metaphor change now that we're in summer?
The metaphor maybe kind of breaks, but here's my thinking. So the story is about leading an ox in the direction that it wants to move. So leading it frontwards rather than backwards.
Right, by the nose rather than the tail.
Exactly. So we have the same ox, if you will, our body, but because the seasons have impacted us and continue to do so, our body wants to move in different ways. So we're still leading the metaphorical ox by the metaphorical nose, but we're going in a different direction, maybe. Mm-hmm. And that direction dictates somewhat how we relate to the nose, the direction that we're moving, that the body wants to be moving in, and how we lead it where we want it to go.
So, okay, one of the things that we talked about in the spring was liver being kind of that ruler dictating a lot of what was happening and like a lot of that rising in inspirational force. And today with fire season and summer, we're going to be talking about the heart. So can you describe how you imagine the difference between like that rising inspiration versus that like heart fire, that like desire and motivation? Because they're really similar, but I'm guessing that there is like a nuanced difference between that like rising sap spirit inspiration, like youthfulness, versus that like mid like height of life drive. Can you enlighten us, please?
So you can. These are the two aspects of yang, or the two major aspects of yang in the wuxing cycle. So you have rising yang and sustained yang, the wood phase and the fire phase. So the rising, people say that the sustained yang is the most yang, and you can see where they're coming from. It is literally the hottest, but it doesn't. It's a stillness which is more of a yin aspect of yang.
And when you say the most yang, you mean like yang in its fullest expression?
Yang in its fullest expression. But it is the true height of summer is that point in the yin yang symbol where there is the black dot in the white fish. Because there is that perfect stillness in the center of the moment where there is the most movement, yang, heat, fire. It's that moment that I would argue, in right now or just past in the last couple of weeks.
And we're gonna do an exercise towards the end of this that will maybe help you find some of that stillness. But you were talking about just now, you said we're kind of coming to the end of it. You talked to me before we started about the difference in calendars and our difference in locations, and therefore our difference in seasons.
So in the like European, the Julian calendar that we use, we regard summer to be from the solstice to the equinox. And in the Chinese calendar, they regard the equinox or the solstice to be the midpoint of summer. So if we're using the Julian mode here in the beginning of August, we're past the halfway point in summer, but not quite to the full 2/3. If we're using the more Chinese style, we are in the last week of summer, if not in the first week of autumn.
And that's because of kind of a difference in like literal placement on the globe and weather,
Yep.
right?
Weather and like oceanic currents, and some of it is math and like idealizing trends, because in no calendar do you have a perfect map to any year.
I think some people would argue that, but that's because there are a lot of different types of calendars out there. But so you talked about the like at this point they would be going China would be going into their rainy season, or soon would be going into like rainy season.
Yeah, I said that, and I think there is a little rainy season, and then it gets dry for the latter part of autumn. But anyone living in China, please correct me or forgive me for my ignorance, because I haven't actually spent a year in China.
But
Here in Montana, I would say that we're at the 2/3 through the summer. I think like July, summer starts the beginning of June in our rainy season, and then end of August, early September is when that feeling of turning into fall really starts.
Yeah, like hiking season, I think of like you can get that really early hiking, but you're going to be pretty snowy until kind of end of June, at least here in the Bozeman area. And then you go through June monsoon and it's going to be rainy and muddy. And then you hit your stride in July, and you can pretty much hike through September if you're willing to put up with a little bit of adverse weather towards the end of that time. But you do cool off. Like September, I would consider fall, but August is like summer. And I think part of that actually ties into like public school system of our understanding of when summer is. But in terms of weather, we really do have to pay attention to the climate that we're in and how that season affects us. And we are looking at the heart with this. So you get this psycho-spiritual and natural phenomena of what's happening in your body and your mind and your spirit, and what's actually happening in the world around you. Do you want to kind of touch on the heart as the mind spirit center of the body?
Sure. Yeah. So in traditional Chinese thought, as it is in older forms of Western thought, and pretty well attested around the world, the center of our being, at least on a psycho-spiritual level, our mental capacity is thought of at least as often, if not more often, in the center of the chest, in the heart area, rather than in the brain. And this is controversial even in old China. Like there are theorists who talk about what the brain's role in cognition is, as far back as like 2nd century China. Like this is an age-old debate, but the usual conclusion tends to be the heart,
which is yeah, like you said, kind of controversial, but especially in the West, I think that might be challenging for people to wrap their, I'm going to say, hearts around instead of heads, because we have been brought into this understanding of logic and mental strength being something that happens in the head and like in this upper body above the head kind of zone, in that space above us. And that's where we live so much of the time. And one of the things that is really challenging for a lot of people is to become embodied and move that center of self further down into the body. Like, I know some people are like, wow, I have feet when they get to be truly embodied. And it's really hard to make that connection sometimes when you're not doing it regularly. So in the West, like I said, we tend to live in our heads and not in our hearts.
Yeah. And this is a perfect time of year to explore what it would be like to operate from your heart, because in the Chinese medical model, this is the time of year that the heart has the most qi, the most ability to do its best and show us where it has shortcomings. So if you have a well-balanced heart in the summer, you are inspired and
Passionate.
high energy, passionate.
Yeah, you're like willing to lean into how you express yourself a little bit more. You're a little more empowered to do that with that heart energy. And so what does the extremes of that look like?
Well, if your heart isn't balanced, then more chi in it will exacerbate those imbalances.
Okay. Can you explain some more on that?
Yes. So on a more psycho-spiritual level, like either mania of your heart is too excited, or depression, your heart is blocked in certain ways. Difficulty sleeping, even if you're not hitting the mania level, difficulty sleeping could be more on that. Either, to use the Chinese medical metaphor, your heart is either dry or too hot.
Can you say that one more time? Because I think there's something there that I want to connect to, and I would love for you to just reiterate what you just said.
So, to rephrase a little bit, in Chinese medicine, we use all these kind of environmental metaphors to talk about our organs. So our liver is windy, our heart is too hot or too cold or dry or wet.
I kind of love that. And I've been exposed to that before, but I haven't necessarily thought about it in the way that I just started thinking about it. But it echoes our relationship with nature in a lot of ways.
For sure.
And one of my questions in regard to heart season that I was going to save for later, but I think is really relevant now, is how do we see this expression of heart and fire in the natural world? So, like, does wildfire play a role? And what is drought like when expressed in the heart? And I think you just said dry, and I thought of drought, but what I think that maybe matches better too is that, at least in my mind, when you have a drought of like that heart fire, that it manifests as that depression, or like that lack of inspiration, that kind of feeling like you're stuck in a spot and you're just there, and there's not necessarily anything to get you out, and you don't feel motivated to get out. And that, to me, is a little bit of that drought in the heart.
For sure. There isn't the resources to allow your heart to bloom a beautiful garden in the summer.
Right. I love that. So we have entered the smoke season here in Montana. So can you talk about, like, what about the wildfire side of that? How do we see that in our bodies?
Yeah, I would say that a wildfire in your body, if it's coming from the heart, because we have liver fire patterns, we have stomach fire patterns, and arguably as we move to the end of summer here, you could see a stomach fire pattern in conjunction, or you could compare a stomach fire pattern to a wildfire or a heart fire pattern. A heart fire pattern would be more like that mania. Mm-hmm. Taking on more than you can handle, allowing the inspiration to get ahead of your ability to get things done.
Yeah. Wow.
Where the stomach fire would be the overconsumption, the drawing in of acres and acres of forest or food in the case of a human.
Yeah, I think that's for a later season, because I think of that as like, oh, we could push that into harvest season, in that when you are pulling in that harvest, and you're over consuming.
For sure.
So one of the things, I was chatting with Susanna in the clinic the other day, and you also reflected this, but was that that heart pattern that you guys have been seeing in treating people is this overstimulation, this like hyperstimulation, and then that being great in that you get a lot done, you're really inspired, but then at night you're sleeping terribly. And I have to say that like I've been getting acupuncture pretty regularly, fortunately, as being married to a wonderful acupuncturist. But I experienced that last week, like to a T. So when she brought it up, I was like, wow, that's what this was. And it was really exciting to see that matched in the like Chinese medical theory to my personal experience. And I'm really happy we're talking about it today because I'm guessing a lot of people will relate.
And I think especially in Montana, that's a easy heart pattern to see in the summer because you've got a little extra heat, that inspiration, the getting keyed up, doing exciting things in your day. It's not like overblown. It's not to a forest fire level, but it's a little extra heat. It's that 90-degree day. And then you got a little dryness in that you're not able to calm down, cool down, let the blood come back into your heart, and rest in the evening.
So one of the things that we were excited to be able to share as a personal anecdote of this manifestation of self-expression with the heart energy in that I like to think balanced way, outside perspectives are important, is that we, Jack and myself, just got married. And we had a very non-traditional wedding that was probably one of the heights of our self-expression. And
Certainly.
we got to see that reflected in our guests. So our wedding was a themed wedding. It was themed Forests of Fantasy, Enchanting and Ethereal. And pretty much that boiled down to Fantasy Renaissance Fair. And I think we had all but maybe 3-5 people out of 100 people in full costume. And we got to see that joyful expression in really unhindered ways that was without judgment. You just got to see this full expression of people's, like, not childishness, but youthful, like, imaginative wonder.
Wondrousness.
And that was a really amazing thing to see. And we may end up sharing some pictures with that online. We'll see. It just depends on how comfortable people are with sharing their faces on the internet. But it was a really impactful experience for people. And being able to nurture that heart expression, that self-expression in yourself is really important, and there aren't always going to be other people to do it for you. So how do you suggest nurturing that heart and self-expression?
Well, in Chinese medicine, we always come back to diet and movement and like fundamental ways of being a human. So food-wise, in this time of year, it's somewhat tailored to how you are relating to the summer. If you're feeling too hot, eat those cucumbers and mint and watermelon, things that are wet and cooling and can help your body regulate in the other direction.
Right, because we're trying to strike balance.
We're trying to strike a balance.
So,
you have to enjoy the summer, but you can't get heat exhaustion and wildfires and
right.
all of those sorts of things.
Right,
So you can use food to cool yourself down. That being said, it is fire season, so eating some pungent foods, some spicy foods, if you're not running into getting too keyed up, getting excited, overcommitting, things like that, enjoying some spicy foods this time of year can be nice. And the advice that everyone in the West never wants to hear from their acupuncturist is eat bitter foods.
What are some bitter foods?
I
know you love them, so you should be able to rattle some off.
Well, the thing is, most of the really bitter things are foods that don't show up in American
cuisine.
diets.
Yeah.
Yes. So there are weird herbs that show up in North African and Middle Eastern cuisines like asafoetida. There's, things in Indian and Chinese cuisines. I think the places you get somewhat bitter in Western American kind of diets are like the rinds of vegetables.
So like maybe if you're doing some summer vegetables like zucchini, leaving that skin on.
Yep.
And like leaving your cucumber skins on.
For sure.
Okay.
And explore a spice that you've not experienced before. It might not be bitter. It might be more pungent or like earthy, sour. There's all sorts of wonderful flavors in the world of foods. But we don't have a lot of inclination towards bitter food in English descended cultures.
Yeah, I know that a lot of Chinese herbal formulas often taste really bitter, especially to me. I don't know. I can't speak to other people's experiences, but I know that there are other ways to get like bittering things in. Like mugwort is an American herb that a lot of people will, and it's also a Chinese herb, depending on your like family and variety, but it's often used in teas for like sleepy time teas or dream teas. That's gonna be a bitter one. I don't recommend this, but like chamomile, if you oversteep it, it will be bitter. Not recommended, just flavor wise. But we were chatting the other day in the kitchen about a spice that you were saying that nobody, and I brought it up, I don't ever want to consume it. But you're like, oh, I really want to try cooking with this. If I think of it, we'll come back to it.
Sounds good.
So if you want to get some bittering things in, leave the skins on your vegetables. Like that's a good way to do it, especially those like green vegetables. I think of those as particularly bitter, like your zucchini.
For sure.
And then
anything that's in season always.
Yeah, eating seasonal foods, bright foods, any kind of like oranges, reds, peppers.
Fire-colored foods.
Fire-colored foods. That's a great way to kind of remember that. You're like, oh, it's fire season. Eat fire-colored foods. And if I'm too hot, eat things that are going to be cooling.
Yep.
Which usually don't have those colors, right? Like they're going to be,
yep.
I mean, watermelon
kind of
has, that pink, but with its
also
like green
watery.
Rind, it's very watery.
Wet. Like it feels
it's
yin.
Hydrating. It's great. So I think one thing, I don't know if I mentioned it, but there are like digestive bitters available as well. A lot of times in like tinctures or other types of infusions. So if that's something that you are like, oh, I really want to consume some bitters, or you need a little bit of that agent in your body, like that could be an avenue that we could look into. But in terms of nurturing the heart on the like psycho-spiritual side, I really like to think about like art creation and experiencing art. And one of the great ways to do that is doing art walks downtown. Like, you look like you have a thought.
If you're in Bozeman, Chalk on the Walk might have been yesterday.
I think it happened already.
But
it means
you can go down and
there.
see all the people's creations.
Yeah, and so art walks are usually Friday nights during the summer. So you get that timeliness in the season, and you can go and see beautiful art that the community has made at different galleries, and you get to do that in a like pretty useful social way, which is nice. I also think that making art is really important. So if you want to do a sip and paint at your favorite brewery, go and do it. Or maybe you like to play music and you want to just jam on your porch, or hide away in the guest room and like scratch away on whatever you're trying to learn. You know, doing some sort of self-expression in that, creating something beautiful in the world. I think I also would throw spending time with loved ones in there, friends and family, and people who inspire your heart a little bit, or a lot of it. And then one of my favorites is that concept of sacred play, or like joy, uninhibited self-expression. So not necessarily saying like, oh, I'm going to act like a kid and I'm going to go and run around on the playground and go down the slides. Like, I love doing that. But there are other ways to do that. A lot of like people like to go out in the woods, and you get that joyful expression of this freedom and inspiration and energy, this enlivening, and anything that's going to inspire your heart in that sort of way. Do you have any favorites that inspire your heart?
Just a thought that I had while prepping for this that hasn't come up yet and is relevant to that somewhat. If both the liver and the heart are related to self-expression, but like they are different aspects of yang in the season, they are different aspects of that self-expression. The heart sort of self-expression is more emphasized on the self of like what you find beautiful, what inspires you, where the liver self-expression is more on the expression, the getting it done, making things happen. Like it's still related to, they're two aspects of the same process, and like all every organ is engaged at all times, but this is a great time to check in with what feels beautiful to you and what you want to create in the world.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that liver kind of energy sounds like it's a little more outward expression versus the heart being a little more inward expression.
Yep. The heart is the center of your psychospiritual being.
Wonderful. So to kind of wrap things up, one of the things Jack and I wanted to share with you is a technique called the Heart Lock-In technique from the Heart Math Institute. One that we learned through other groups, and we've practiced a number of times. We've included it in our meditations, and we'd really like to share that with you. And I would love for Jack to lead that. There's going to be 4 parts to it. We can match it to any sort of breath practice, and those parts are ease, joy, love, and gratitude. So, Jack, do you want us...
So if you're listening to us somewhere where it's safe to do this, like not driving, I'll invite you to sit or lay down or get comfortable in your body and take a deep breath. And move your sensation from your head, where we've just spent a lot of time thinking about ideas that aren't necessarily familiar to many people, and let all that go and move that consciousness down into the middle of your chest. And as you settle into your heart and your body as a whole, we're going to take a few moments to just think repeatedly, like a mantra, ease. And see how that affects the sensation in your heart. And the sensation in your body. And if you're doing this on your own, you can take as long as you like with any of these phases. You can cycle through them and come back. But we're going to take a few moments resonating the word joy with our heart. How is that transition between ease and joy? What does your heart feel like now? Does joy move in your body differently than ease? Are you smiling? And as you continue to breathe, change the mantra to love. Let that love fill your chest and your abdomen, your arms and your legs and your head, and extend beyond you. Thinking love, feeling love, and one more deep breath in with love and out with gratitude. Maybe you have a long list of things you're grateful for. Maybe you can't think of anything. It doesn't matter. You're just chanting gratitude. Seeing what that feels like. How is the movement of gratitude in your heart and in your body? Can you feel grateful for the breath in your lungs? How about the ground under your feet? Gently place your hands over your heart and feel that ease and joy and love and gratitude all swirling around in there. And whenever you're ready, wiggle your fingers and toes, open your eyes, go back to wherever you are, and carry all that good heart energy through the day.
Thank you, Jack. That was beautiful. One thing I would like to wrap up with that Jack actually taught me with some Qigong, which of course would pair wonderfully with this practice, is a saying, and correct me if I'm getting it wrong, but I think I've got it right. I am in the universe. The universe is in my body. The universe and I combine. Pretty close.
How I learned it was, I'm in the universe is in my body, the universe and I combine together.
Combine together. And I think that's a great way to understand that we are in the world and the world is within us. And there is this beautiful and eternal cycle of expression in the world outside of us and within ourselves. So thank you all for taking the time to listen to us today. I'm Dawn Schwem, an integrative nutrition health coach at Great Turning Healing Center. And I have with me
Jack Schwem.
Our wonderful acupuncturist.
Oh yeah, that too.
And we will catch you next time. Looking forward to another wonderful conversation.